Things don't feel right somehow. Being a little bit older, being driven by curiosity and a desire just to flourish a little bit and explore the capabilities that I have. Part of it, of course, is decades of going, things don't feel right somehow, some sort of sense of dukkha, and thinking, oh, well, maybe if I just achieve more, I can overcome that, until I eventually worked out that it wasn't the solution. And I think that's because we don't know our minds, or a default position is we don't know our minds. So we don't see the clinging operating, so we become slaves to it, right? It arises in reaction to something that triggers some kind of emotional reaction and wallowing. As a result, we undergo a process of creating new reactive tendencies that just reinforce that whole cycle of the origination of. So, as you know, Suchandra, it requires a lot of effort to see that and to understand it fully and to unwind it and rewire the brain so that it no longer experiences those kind of effluence of autonomic reactions to events that are out of our control. So I think that seems to be the default state, right? We think that we have this state of ignorance that leads us to think, there's this thing I can possess, I'm me, and I can possess that, and I can bind it into me. And we don't really understand that they're just all ephemeral processes that we've applied some layer of abstraction to. And so, of course, we can never possess them properly because the whole way we're perceiving them is fundamentally erroneous. So no matter how much we do, there's still the sense of, that didn't quite work out. There's some kind of unsatisfactoriness there. So as a result, without doing the work to overcome that, we're constantly going, I want that, or I want to avoid this. All these attempts to create homeostasis in the organism by seeking to acquire things or avoid things. And to me, that is clinging. It's any kind of movement away or movement towards that's arising sort of semi-autonomously or autonomically that we don't really observe and see, and is in effect pulling our strings, being our puppet master. Clinging is a fairly broad set of these subconscious behaviors that make us these unthinking emotional beings. So the deep work of unwinding clinging is ultimately the greater sutra on the four foundations of mindfulness. Everything is in there, in my view. You can talk about maybe there's a bit more that's required in terms of compassion practices and flourishing. And, all leads on to the Mahayana route to say, well, there's something a little bit thin or missing in the basic Theravada stuff. But in terms of working with the clinging itself, yeah, it's all there. There's a whole heap of practices that can be applied. You need to consecutively address all of those foundations of mindfulness. It's the progress through body, emotions, mind, and dharmas, which I would call the perceptual construction of self and reality is. And so some start at different areas. If you look at the particular stages, it's starting at non-duality, whereas breath meditation is obviously starting at the body, and compassion-based practices are starting at emotions. You've got to do them all at some stage and in some way. No matter the order, you've got to do them all, and you've got to follow those practices. And I think that the real key is to treat mindfulness as a way of being. It's not to say every second, but it's a habit of your life to observe the things that arise and see clearly what's happening. And I think, to see it really clearly, if you can observe the arising of things 2 or 3 times a day, even, and just watch the 3 characteristics, the impermanence of them, the fact that not you, there's something that is not essentially your nature, it's just a component that is porously connected, and that it only becomes a source of suffering if clung to bring back clinging. And if you can see the 3 characteristics of things that are arising in your life a few times a day, I think that's fantastic. And, that's the 4 foundations of mindfulness, all the things that might arise and how to work with them. It's very extensive. There's no one way, but I think that is the way to work with it ultimately, is mindfulness throughout the day. But having said that, of course, you might have to do preparatory practices to have the ability to do that, to have the concentration and the calm and the insight to do that. So preparatory practices may be necessary as well, but I think ultimately it's mindfulness.